Welcome back to the Lagoon, everybody, here in the garden area of the Grand Library. As you can see, it is rather festive, and yes, it is winter, so I have my ugly Christmas sweater on. Kevin! I hope you're all having a wonderful feast day of St. Nicholas if you do partake in such an illustrious holiday. I know I've got my stocking, and boy, I tell you what, he hooked me up with an awesome record and a little bottle of something, you know what I'm saying. It's also very festive in the garden area because we are now going to be residing within the wonderful seaport town, Kingsport. And Kingsport is arguably my favorite seaport town that Lovecraft has created. I know a majority say, oh, Innsmouth, and you know, I love it too. You know, I'm Gill-boy, so of course I feel safe where Father Dagon and his cult reside. And yes, obviously that is the great Cthulhu himself, and that iconic scene in the story on my mug here. But not to get too sidetracked from other mythos stories, our stay at Kingsport is going to be rather fun, and will pretty much be for the rest of our time for this month of December, which is very appropriate because Kingsport is known for its festivals, especially pertaining to the winter solstice and Christmas. So, you know, I thought it'd be appropriate to kind of decorate the garden area as well as the main hall. Now, the main hall is still under construction, which is why we're in the garden area. And I also want to inform you that my tie has not only been recovered from the lake, but I have also ordered another tie, and it has finally come in. So when we do return to the Grand Hall of the Grand Library, the dress code will be strictly in effect once more. Now, in spite of all that exciting news, this is going to probably be a very short video because The Terrible Old Man is a very, very, very short story. So I'm also going to attach another short story, which I think is like a page or maybe a page and a half long, called Polaris. And that is a fantasy dream cycle tell. And seeing as how we're going to be in Kingsport and it's a central hub for other dream cycle stories, I figured it'd be appropriate to introduce you to this seaport town with a Waking World story, very iconic Waking World story called The Terrible Old Man. Now, in saying this about the story, I'm not going to get into some of the criticism of this story. You know, Lovecraft is a controversial character. That's not news to anybody who has an ounce of knowledge on him or his works. I will not really discuss that in this video, but if you want to, there's plenty of critiques of this story where I myself do not agree with any of those criticisms of the story being racist at all. But that's up for you to decide yourself, and if you think so, then more power to you. I myself do not agree with that and enjoy it for what it is, about three robbers messing around with somebody that they mistakenly should not have. So, before we get into actually reading it, let's kind of do a little more history on it. So The Terrible Old Man, it has less than, or it's fewer than 1,000, it's fewer than 1,200 words, obviously written by H.P. Lovecraft, and it was written on January 28, 1920, and was first published in The Tryout, an amateur press publication, in July 1921, and it is the first story to make use of Lovecraft's imaginary New England setting, introducing the fictional town of Kingsport. And just to kind of, I guess, talk a little bit more about this story, because there's not that much to say about it. There was a video game of the same name, The Terrible Old Man. It's a free point-and-click adventure game, and it was released for Windows and Android in 2015 by Cloak and Dagger Games. And the game basically, you play as the main robber, and it basically ends with the last couple sentences from the short story. So yeah, there's really not much more to talk about the story. So I guess we'll just kind of get ourselves all warm and cozy and get your drinks ready, and we will begin. Let me grab the book real fast. All right. You know it. All right. The Terrible Old Man by H.P. Lovecraft. It was the design of Anglo Ritchie and Yo Yannick and Manuel Silva to call on the terrible old man. This old man dwells all alone in a very ancient home in Water Street near the sea, and is reputed to be both exceedingly rich and exceedingly feeble, which forms a situation very attractive to men of the profession of Monsieurs Ritchie, Yannick, and Silva, for that profession was nothing less dignified than robbery. The inhabitants of Kingsport say and think many things about the terrible old man, which generally keep him safe from the attentions of gentlemen like Mr. Ritchie and his colleagues. Despite the almost certain fact that he hides a fortune of indefinite magnitude somewhere about his musty and venerable abode, he is in truth a very strange person, believed to have been a captain of East India clipper ships in his day, so old that no one can remember when he was young, and so taciturn that few know his real name. Among the gnarled trees in the front yard of his aged and neglected place, he maintains a strange collection of large stones, oddly grouped and painted so that they resemble the idols of some obscure Eastern temple. This collection frightens away most of the small boys who love to taunt the terrible old man about his long white hair and beard, or to break the small pane windows of his dwelling with wicked missiles. But there are other things which frighten the older, more curious folk who sometimes steal up to the house to peer in through the dusty panes. These folks say that on a table in a bare room on the ground floor are many peculiar bottles, and each a small piece of lead suspended pendulum-wise from a string. And they say that the terrible old man talks to these bottles, addressing them by such names as Jack, Scarface, Long Tom, Spanish Joe, Peters, and Matt Ellis. And that whenever he speaks to a bottle, the little lead pendulum within makes certain definite vibrations as if in answer. Those who have watched the tall, lean, terrible old man in these peculiar conversations do not watch him again. But Anglo Ritchie and Yo Yannick and Manuel Silva were not of Kingsport blood. They were of that new and heterogeneous alien stock which lies outside the charmed circle of New England life and traditions, and they saw in the terrible old man merely a tottering, almost helpless graybeard, who could not walk without the aid of his knotted cane, and whose thin, weak hands shook pitifully. They were really quite sorry in their way for their lonely, unpopular old fellow, whom everybody shunned, and at whom all the dogs barked singularly. But business is business, and to a robber whose soul is in his profession, there is a lure and a challenge about a very old and very feeble man who has no account at the bank, and who pays for his few necessities at the village store with Spanish gold and silver minted 2 centuries ago. Monsieurs Ritchie, Yannick, and Silva selected the night of April 11th for their call. Mr. Ritchie and Mr. Silva were to interview the poor old gentleman, whilst Mr. Yannick waited for them in their presumably metallic burden with a covered motor car in Ship Street, by the gate in the tall rear wall of their host's grounds. Desire to avoid needless explanations in case of unexpected police intrusions prompted these plans for a quiet and instantaneous departure. As prearranged, the 3 adventurers stayed out separately in order to prevent any evil-minded suspicion afterwards. Mr. Ritchie and Silva met in Water Street, but the old man's front gate, and although they did not like the way the moon shone down upon the painted stones through the budding branches of the gnarled trees, they had more important things to think about than mere idle superstition. They feared it might be unpleasant work making the terrible old man loquacious concerning his hoarded gold and silver, for aged sea captains are notably stubborn and perverse. Still, he was very old and very feeble, and there were 2 visitors. Monsieur Ritchie and Silva were experienced in the art of making unwilling persons voluble, and the screams of a weak and exceptionally venerable man can be easily muffled. So they moved up to the one lighted window and heard the terrible old man talking childishly to his bottles with pendulums. Then they donned masks and knocked politely at the weather-stained oaken door. Waiting seemed very long to Mr. Yannick, and he fidgeted restlessly in the covered motor car by the terrible old man's back gate in Ship Street. He was more than ordinarily tender-hearted, and he did not like the hideous screams he had heard in the ancient house just after the hour appointed for the deed. Had he not told his colleagues to be as gentle as possible with the pathetic old sea captain? Very nervously he watched that narrow oaken gate in the high and ivy-clad stone wall. Frequently he consulted his watch and wondered at the delay. Had the old man died before revealing where his treasure was hidden? And had a thorough search become necessary? Mr. Yannick did not like to wait so long in the dark in such a place. Then he sensed a soft tread or a trapping on the walk inside the gate, heard a gentle fumbling at the rusty latch, and saw the narrow heavy door swing inward, and in the pallid glow of the single dim street lamp he strained his eyes to see what his colleagues had brought out of that sinister house which loomed so close behind. But when he looked, he did not see what he had expected, and for his colleagues were not there at all, but only the terrible old man leaning quietly on his knotted cane and smiling hideously. Mr. Yannick had never before noticed the color of that man's eyes. Now he saw that they were yellow. Little things make considerable excitement in little towns, which is the reason that Kingsport people talked all that spring and summer about the 3 unidentified bodies, horribly slashed as with many cutlasses, and horribly mangled as by the tread of many cruel boot heels, which the tide washed in. And some people even spoke of things as trivial as the deserted motor car found in Ship Street, or certain especially inhuman cries, probably of a stray animal or migratory bird, heard in the terrible night by wakeful citizens. But in this idle village gossip the terrible old man took no interest at all. He was by nature reserved, and when one is aged and feeble, one's reserve is doubtlessly strong. Besides, so ancient a sea captain must have witnessed scores of things much more stirring in the far-off days of his unremembered youth. That's what happens, bro. You go into a seaport town, you think you're the main man, you see an old man, and you're like, yo, bro, we're gonna rob him. Guess what? You mess around, you find out. You know what I'm saying? That's what I take from the story. I don't see the racism, but maybe I'm wrong, and all these other people are right. But who knows? Anyways, I hope you really much enjoyed that story. I love it. I think it's awesome. I think it's creepy. No offense against old people or anything, but like if there's any like creepy old person in a horror story, or like, you know, like the movie Insidious with the creepy old lady, bro, I'm so out. I can't handle it. I know some people can't handle like little kids and stuff, like little kid ghosts and stuff. Well, I'm the opposite. I can't handle like old people ghosts or creepy old people. Like I'm so out. So that story, I love it, but it creeps me out just to think of this like old sea captain living in this creepy thing. And you know, he is a returning character in the mythos. He will be in the Strange High House in the Mist. He gives some exposition on the lore of Kingsport and also of the Strange House. And it alludes that this guy kind of knows deeper knowledge of the mythos, which obviously he does because he's got like yellow eyes and has like, yes, not Wallace, Peters, and starts glowing. I mean, it's cool, creepy imagery. Cool, creepy imagery to me. I think it's awesome, you know, like it's a great story. And and I felt that it would be obviously a great introduction into Kingsport, into that festive Kingsport town. So like I said, that's pretty much it, right? And there's not much more to talk about this story unless you really want to psychoanalyze it about them being immigrants or foreigners, and therefore the story's racist because they're robbers or something. But whatever, I don't see it. To me, it's just a bunch of assholes coming into a town and being disrespectful to its residents and thinking that they can steal and rob. So just to drag out this video to at least hopefully get to about 15 to 20 minutes, we're going to read another very, very, very short story. It's like a page and a half. It's a dream cycle story called Polaris, and it's a fantasy, dream cycle story, and it was written in 1918 and first published in the December 1920 issue of the amateur journal The Philosopher. This is the first story that really kind of introduces the fictional mnemonic manuscripts, the first of the arcane tomes. Excuse me. That manuscript has already been mentioned in other stories that we have read, but this is where its first appearance is. But it's basically, it's just a story. The narrator is unnamed, and it's like his nightly obsession with the pole star and a recurring dream of a city under siege. And basically it's Lovecraft kind of being autobiographical, with feeling like useless during World War One. So that's kind of interesting. This is kind of like a therapeutic story that he himself wrote about his own feelings about it. But this story, was later reprinted in May 1926 in the edition of the Natural Amateur, and in February 1934 an issue of Fantasy Fan, and in December of 1937 in an issue of Weird Tales. But yeah, basically, this it's been criticized in a way. I know William Fulwiler writes that Polaris is one of Lovecraft's most autobiographical stories, reflecting his feelings of guilt, frustration, and uselessness during World War I. Like the narrator, Lovecraft was denied a warrior's part, for he was feeble and given to strange faintings when subjected to stress and hardships. Like many of Lovecraft's stories, Polaris was in part inspired by a dream which he described in a letter. Several nights ago, I had a strange dream of a strange city, a city of many places and gilded domes, lying in a hollow betwixt ranges of gray, horrible hills. I was, as I said, aware of this city visually. I was in it and around it, but certainly I had no corporeal existence. Lovecraft remarked on the peculiar similarity of the story's style to that of Lord Dunsany, whose work he would not read for another year. And H.P. Lovecraft Encyclopedia suggests that Lovecraft and Dunsany were both influenced by the prose poem of Edgar Allan Poe. So I figured that this would be kind of a cool, little video or short story, to finalize this video and to get you in preparation for the next couple of videos and the Christmas video. So I hope you've got your drink ready. Get yourself all cozy. And we're going to read Polaris. Now, this is in the Dagon book. And let's see if our faithful friend has given it a ranking. Yeah, they did. And I don't know if you can see it there, but they gave it a C. Yeah. Yeah, again, they're not too much of a fan of the dream cycle. They're really not. But yeah, there it is. It's like 2 pages. So without further ado, Polaris by H.P. Lovecraft. Into the north window of my chambers glows the pole star with uncanny light. All through the long hellish hours of blackness it shines there, and in the autumn of the year, when the winds from the north curse and whine, the red-leaved trees of the swamp mutter things to one another in the small hours of the morning under the horn-waning moon. I sit by the casement and watch that star. Down from the heights reels the glittering Cassiopeia as the hours wear on, while Charles Wayne lumbers up from behind the vapor-soaked swamp trees that sway in the night wind. Just before dawn, Arcturus winks ruddily from the cemetery on the low hillock, and Coma Berenice shimmers widely afar off in the mysterious east. But still the pole star leers down from the same place in the black vault, winking hideously like an insane watching eye, which strives to convey some strange message, yet recalls nothing save that it once had a message to convey. Sometimes when it is cloudy, I can sleep. Well do I remember the night of the great aurora, when over the swamp played the shocking crustaceans of the demon light. After the beam came clouds, and then I slept. And it was under a horn-waning moon that I saw the city for the first time. Still and solemn did it lie, on a strange plateau and hollow betwixt strange peaks, of ghastly marble, where its walls and its towers, its columns, domes, and pavements, and the marble streets were marble pillars, the upper parts of which were carven into the images of grey-bearded men. The air was warm and stirred not, and overhead, scare 10 degrees from the zenith, glowed that watching pole star. Long did I gaze on the city, but the day came not, when the red Aldebaran, which blinked low in the sky but never set, had crawled a quarter of the way around the horizon. I saw light and motion in the houses and the streets, forms strangely robbed and at once noble and familiar, walked aboard, and under the horn-waning moon men talked wisdom in a tongue which I understood, though it was unlike any language I had ever known. And when the red Aldebaran had crawled more than halfway around the horizon, there were again darkness and silence. When I awakened, I was not as I had been. Upon my memory was graven a vision of the city, and within my soul had arisen another and vaguer recollection, of which nature I was not then certain. Thereafter, on the cloudy nights when I could sleep, I saw the city often, sometimes under the hot yellow rays of a sun which did not set, but which wheeled low around the horizon, and on the clear nights the pole star leered as never before. Gradually I came to wonder what might be my place in that city on the strange plateau betwixt strange peaks. At first content to view the scene as an all-observant uncorporeal presence, I now desired to define my relation to it, and to speak my mind amongst the grave men who conversed each day in the public squares. I said to myself, this is no dream. For by what means can I prove the greater reality of that other life in the house of stone and brick south of the sinister swamp and the cemetery on the low hillock, where the pole star peeps into my north window each night? One night, as I listened to the discourse in the large square containing many statues, I felt a change, and perceived that I had at last a bodily form. Nor was I stranger in the streets of Ulthal, which lies on the plateau of Sarkai, betwixt the peaks of Nauton and Capodonic. It was my friend Alos who spoke, and his speech was one that pleased my soul, for it was the speech of a true man and patriot. That night had the news come of Dacios' fall, and of the advance of the Aiuntos, squat hellish yellow fiends who 5 years ago had appeared out of the unknown west to ravage the confines of our kingdom, and to besiege many of our towns. Having taken the fortified places at the foot of the mountains, their way now lay open to the plateau, unless every citizen could resist with the strength of 10 men. For the squat creatures were mighty in the arts of war, and knew not the scruples of honor which held back our tall, gray-eyed men of Lomar from ruthless conquest. Alos, my friend, was commander of all the forces of the plateau, and in him lay the last hope of our country. On this occasion he spoke of the perils to be faced, and exhorted the men of Ulthal, bravest of the Lomarians, to sustain the traditions of their ancestors, who, when forced to move southward from Zobna before the advance of the great ice sheet, even as our descendants must some day flee from the land of Lomar, violently and victoriously swept aside the hairy, long-armed cannibal Nopax that stood in their way. To me Alos denied a warrior's part, for I was feeble and given to strange faintings when subjected to stress and hardships. But my eyes were the keenest in the city, despite the long hours I gave each day to the study of the monodic manuscripts and the wisdom of the Zobnarian fathers. So, my friend, desiring not to doom me to inaction, rewarded me with that duty which was second to nothing in importance. To the watchtower of Thampanen he sent me, there to serve as the eyes of our army. Should the Anutos attempt to gain the citadel by the narrow pass behind the peak Nauton and thereby surprise the garrison, I was to give the signal of fire which would warn the waiting soldiers and save the town from immediate disaster. Alone I mounted the tower, for every man of stout body was indeed in the passes below. My brain was sore dazed with excitement and fatigue, for I had not slept in many days, yet was my purpose firm, for I love my native land of Lomar and the marble city of Ultha that lies betwixt the peaks of Nauton and Capodonic. But I stood in the tower's topmost chambers. I beheld the horn-waning moon, in red and sinister, quivering through the vapors that hovered over the distant valley of Banoff, and through an opening in the roof glittered the pale pole star, fluttering as if alive and leering like a fiend and tempter. Methought its spirit whispered evil counsel, soothing me to traitorous somnolence with a damnable rhythmical promise which it repeated over and over. Slumber, watcher, till the spheres, 6 the 20,000 years have revolved, and I return to the spot where now I burn. Other stars anon shall rise to the axis of the skies, stars that soothe and stars that bless with the sweet forgetfulness. Only when my round is over shall the past disturb thy door. Vainly did I struggle with my drowsiness, seeking to connect these strange words with some lore of the skies which I had learnt from the monodic manuscripts. My head, heavy and reeling, drooped to my breast, and when next I looked up it was in a dream, with the pole star grinning at me through a window from over the horrible swaying trees of a dream swamp, and I am still dreaming. In my shame and despair I sometimes scream frantically, begging the dream creatures around me to waken me ere the Anotos steal up the pass behind the peak Nauton and take the citadel by surprise. But these creatures are daemons, for they laugh at me and tell me I am not dreaming. They mock me whilst I sleep, and whilst the squat yellow foe may be creeping silently upon us, I have failed in my duty and betrayed the marble city of Olatha. I have proven false to Alos, my friend and commander, but still these shadows of my dreams beride me. They say there is no land of Lomar, save in my nocturnal imaginings, that in these realms where the pole star shines high and red Aldebaran crawls low around the horizon, there has never been naught save ice and snow for thousands of years, and never a man save squat yellow creatures blighted by the cold whom they call Eskimos. But as I writhe in my guilty agony, frantic to save the city whose pearl every moment grows, and vainly striving to shake off this unnatural dream of a house of stone and brick south of a sinister swamp and a cemetery on a low hillock, the pole star, evil and monstrous, leers down from the black vault, winking hideously like an insane watching eye, which strives to convey some message, yet recalls nothing save that it once had a message to convey. My boy Lovecraft wishing he could fight in World War One right there. Yeah, it's a pretty cool dream tell story. Now that story, how he talked about the Eskimo, I can see the Rossism a little bit there. But as far as Terrible Old Man, not so much. But anyways, in conclusion of this video, I'm glad that I could kind of drag it out so we can spend at least 30 minutes with each other. I hope you enjoyed it. I waited to post this video today so it could be kind of festive and you could kind of enjoy it into the weeks come. Now, that being said, I do have a few more videos in store for you. So I have this video now, and then next week I will upload another Lovecraft story, and then the week after that I'll do obviously one more, and then the week of Christmas, on Christmas Eve, I will do the Lovecraft Christmas poems and the double feature of The Strange High House in the Mist, and of course the festival. If you have any recommendations of stories that you would like me to read, please put it in the comments, and once I get updated to that, I will then start on those. I will also have a very special New Year's Eve and New Year's Day video audiobook for you as well. So there's a lot to look forward to if you're enjoying these audiobooks from me, which I hope you are. And as usual, I have my video game streams every Wednesday, and we have Chamber of Horrors Saturdays, as well as on certain Fridays. So I hope you tune in for all of that excitement and continue to come into the Grand Library, either into the Grand Hall or into our illustrious garden area, and enjoy your stay. So as far as that being said, I look forward to your next return. So stay salty, stay spooky, and always Cthulhu Fatagan.